Hello, everyone. You are listening to the DMZ America Podcast for Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. Coming to you from the left, I am political cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I'm political cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right. And you know, it's the week before Christmas, Ted. And you know what that means?
Gifts.
Gifts.
And
our special...
And
we have a special gift. It's the best time of the year. Go.
Yes, all the way from the great white north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We have editorial cartoonist Rob Rogers, formerly of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and now, like many of us, slogging it out as a rugged independent. Rob Rogers is, of course, a lauded political cartoonist and comic strip artist. He has books, he has prizes. He was famously fired for criticizing Trump at the Post-Gazette, and that became a huge national story. I forget, did they give you a Pulitzer yet? If not, that you deserve.
No, they did not. No, I was a finalist twice, but no prize.
I don't know. It's like, yes, that's one of those things. Like, actually, it is kind of weird if I think like Rob Rogers is on that list of people who wait, he should have gotten.
Wait, yeah.
But yeah, I would have thought at some point they would have gotten around to you, but well, they should have. They're assholes.
Well, now it's probably not ever going to happen because of I'm not doing charts and graphs and things like that
right. You guys, this is the season it's contest season is upon us. I was actually thinking, I seriously have always threatened not to apply for the Pulitzer, and mostly then after loudly saying I would not, then usually did. I have skipped it a few years. And always been happy when I did, I have to say, because it always goes those years to people who don't do anything like I do. So I'm like, oh, well, I wouldn't have been in the mix, right? So what are you guys, what do you guys
I would have been happy to skip back in the old days when we used to have to spray mount all the entries into a big,
giant,
into Mitt Romney's notebook and try to make it look like this, this really artistic presentation. And I've judged a few of these contests, and sometimes people, would send the stuff in like that and be really, really professionally done. And then other people would just stick them in a notebook and, and it almost didn't matter, sometimes. But no, as far as the electronically, it's so easy to enter now that it's almost like, okay,
Yeah, you still got to do it.
I'm not going to do it this year because I didn't do it. I mean, they've changed the rules, and basically we're now competing against gag cartoonists and people who do charticles,
comics journalism, and illustrate. They call it. What do they call it?
Editorial illustration, maybe, or something like that.
Well, anything but editorial cartoons, I think is the name of the category now.
But Rob Rogers, Scott Stantis.
I think it's called illustrated opinion commentary or something like that. The category.
Yeah, but let's face it. Last year's was bullshit. I mean, it was just it was garbage. It was everything. You know how rich Bezos is?
Oh God.
Really, really rich. You know how rich he is?
I know.
Super rich. You know how rich he is? Extremely rich. You know how rich he is? Like a lot are rich. It's just like it was the same.
Because it was all different graphs about for those who are listening, about his wealth and how it compared to other things in life. I think that was it. And I mean, it would be like if we were entering and we put in like 10 or 20 cartoons about Bezos, comparing him to different, just using different metaphors to show that he's rich. I mean, that's all it was. There was no. There was no real. I mean, there was definitely
his wealth could be measured in walrus tusks. How many tusks would there be?
Now, Rob, did you get this questionnaire from the Pulitzer board?
I did, yes.
The woke thing.
Yeah. I filled it out. I mean, I answered the questions, but it seemed kind of weird and.
Kind of. We actually filled it out here on DMZ America.
We did it live. We did it live on video. I think it was without a doubt one of the most hated and unpopular sections of the podcast. Several people went crazy online declaiming us for being total time-wasting assholes. It was like watching paint dry.
No, it was interesting.
It was fun for us. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to demonstrate the bullshittery that is now the Pulitzer Prize. So there's that.
Well, good for you guys for, like flagging that, because
Well,
I'm sure
I mean,
nobody
yeah,
else
for all the
cares
good
about
that
it.
it's going to do.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
changed everything. We're yeah.
I haven't heard back from them to say that, after that podcast, we decided we were going back to the old ways.
Yeah, we're just like the president of Penn, hang our heads in shame.
Well, more like the president of Harvard, because we haven't quit.
Right.
When we
All right.
probably should.
Let's get to this because we have a lot to cover in a relatively short time. Today's big, I think this is an absolutely seismic news story. The Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump is formally an insurrectionist under the meaning of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and therefore ordered the Secretary of State over there to strip him out of the GOP primary ballot, with meaning that unless this is reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court, he will not appear. You'll see DeSantis and Ramaswamy and Haley and Christie and so on. But if you're a Republican voter over there, I don't know if that's one of those crossover states where you don't have to be a Republican to vote in the primary. But anyway, the point is those who do vote in the primary will not see Donald Trump unless things change. 13 other states have similar 14th Amendment cases currently pending. I expect that number to increase. There's other states, Supreme Courts have taken a different tack. New Hampshire and Minnesota both decided to throw out the cases, not for the general election. They said they would revisit similar cases for that, but on the grounds that the parties have the right to set their own rules in the primaries, and that who qualifies to be the nominee is not an issue under the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment only governs who qualifies to actually run for office, and that the primary just determines who is the nominee. That anybody, I mean, for example, someone who's under the age of 35 and therefore would not be qualified for office, or someone who's not born in the United States could nevertheless be nominated by a party. And so anyway, I think this is massive, and it raises all sorts of very serious questions. I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, no, I was watching some of the commentary about it, and the thing that struck me was, I mean, my gut reaction is finally someone is saying this guy's a criminal. Let's get on with it. But on a more serious note, I was thinking, well, is this really what the Constitution is laying out there? And I think it will go to the Supreme Court, obviously, and they'll have to make the decision. But that's going to be tough for them, because I don't think, I mean, if they throw it back, that's the same as saying they support it, right? I mean,
that's saying that would say that it stands. Yeah.
So
my early instinct was that they would not accept the case because they had so much Bush v. Gore regret, right? They wish they had not ruled on that.
But that was a different Supreme Court, so this Supreme Court has a lot of different members, so
it's a different issue, because this time you have different states with different federal judges coming up with different interpretations, and therefore that sort of tends to call for a higher authority to set a national standard.
Yeah, this is clearly a constitutional issue, a constitutional question. I mean, Ted and I spoke a little earlier today. I mean, this is how Trump of America is this, that this is we have zilch, any kind of jurisprudence, any kind of judicial review of this issue at all. It's never come up ever in the history of the country in the 150 plus years since it was put in.
Not for president, but it has
there have been kept out congressmen. Yeah,
and there are rules for those people. So it's just that we've never had it come up, and so there's never been any ruling on it.
It's also only been used to remove people who already were in office. It's never been used to kick someone off the ballot, I don't think. Maybe on one occasion, perhaps.
I mean, okay, so I'm torn, as I so often am. On the one hand, yeah, I'm a never Trumper. I think the guy's a piece of shit. I've said that several times. I'll keep saying it. I think if he gets reelected, it's the end of democracy as I came to know it in this country. But, the way you stop that is you get people not to vote for him, in my view. Is this the right way to go? The second part of the equation, which we haven't touched on yet, is also the due process. There has been no due process here. He hasn't been convicted of this. He hasn't been charged with it. Well, he is charged with it, I guess.
No,
Georgia case.
He's not charged with. He's not charged with.
Well, the Georgia
Jack
case.
Smith decided not to charge him.
Is that not have insurrection? Okay.
Yeah, because that was a heavy lift.
So yeah, so I the reason I laid the groundwork that I despise this guy is to say that even though I despise him, due process to me in my mind is essential, because it could happen to someone that I do respect. That the Republicans, if they gain power, could do something similar to Joe Biden hiding his son's laptop amounts to insurrection. I know it's stupid, but we live in stupid times. That aspect of it disturbs me deeply. So it has to go to the Supreme Court to determine those issues, which the Colorado court has not. Now, the right wing, I'm not sure how many of you have taken a stroll over to the right side to see what they're saying today. And it is fascinating that the first and foremost, their first line of attack always seems to be the Trump attack, which is attack the person who's attacking you. Mm-hmm. So you can go to the Daily Mail has already posted things charging the 4 judges in Colorado with the worst thing you can possibly be called, a Democrat,
far left, Soros backed, right?
Yes. Well, they were all 4 of them were appointed by Democratic governors. So, and I guess one of them
they all were.
No,
all 7 judges, including those who voted no in the dissent. Yeah, they were all appointed by Democratic governors.
But one of the hits which tickled me because it just gets so fucking stupid is one of them, this did this politically, and one of them likes to sing. I like to. I'm no good at it, but I mean, Rob's done it professionally.
Has he? Is that true?
Well, I would say professionally is a little bit of a. I used to play on the weekends and make money. Yeah,
that's professionally.
Days.
Yeah, that's like saying if you sold yourself for sex on the weekends for money.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was many years ago. Many years ago.
So anyway, that's my conflict with it. And Ted's is even more deeper, and you feel much more strongly that this is just wrong.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say, I have a serious problem with. Basically, this is like the appendix of the Constitution. It's a part of the Constitution that no one ever uses and that nobody knows why it's there. It was essentially rendered obsolete by the General Amnesty of 1872, right? So after, there were all these former Confederate officials, including most notably one of my favorite figures, John C. Breckinridge of Kentucky, former vice president between 1856 and 1860. He ran for office. He was one of the 4 candidates in the great election of 1860. John Bell, Stephen Douglas, and of course Lincoln. He then, because he was from Kentucky, he felt obliged to join the Confederacy, even though he was not pro-slavery or really in favor of splitting the Union, but he felt like he had to stick with his home state. And so he became a cabinet level, I believe he was Secretary of War under the Confederate government.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he went into hiding. He was on the lam, like hopscotching across Caribbean islands after 1865 and the defeat. And ultimately, he was one of those people who was pardoned by the General Amnesty of 1872, where it was just like Grant said, we're putting all this shit behind us. We're wiping the slate clean. Everyone can come home. Everyone's forgiven. It's over. So in other words, the 14th Amendment was really kind of only on the books for 4 years. It ceased to be relevant. It's only been used like in some really ridiculous examples, like the socialist Victor Berger, the one-term socialist congressman who was, went to jail for charged with sedition for opposing World War I, along with Eugene Debs. But basically it's never used. And so I have a serious problem with the self-executing aspect of the insurrection clause, right? So in other words, you don't have to have a formal determination by a jury or of any sort that this person's an insurrectionist. It's enough for a judge to be like, I know insurrection when I see it, and that's an insurrectionist, and which is what the Colorado Supreme Court did. They said, okay, well, we look at him. Clearly, he's an insurrectionist. Okay, I mean, reasonable people disagree about that. Reasonable people also disagree on what the definition of an insurrection is, or what it was when the amendment was passed in 1868. Does it have to be an attempt to overthrow the government? Is it enough just to interfere with an important government function? And also, here's the thing: we don't know what Trump did up to, during, and after January 6th. It's not known. There's too many unanswered questions. And I feel like to just say, okay, based on that, we're going to take this guy off the ballot. And I guess it might not matter if we were Italy and we had 18 parties on the ballot, but we've only got 2. And so in a lot of states, like the Greens can't even get on the ballot, right? Or the Libertarians. So, I mean, there's a really plausible scenario where millions of American voters will go into the voting booth next November, and they'll be like, would you like to vote for Joe Biden or no one at all? And that's not democracy. I mean, that's Saddam Hussein's Iraq. I mean, that's a problem. And I know that if I walked into the voting booth and I saw vote for Donald Trump, or I would be really fucking upset. So, the fact that I'm not going to vote for Trump doesn't mean, I care about my fellow citizens who are Republicans, and I care about their reactions, and I don't want them to feel completely alienated and pissed off from the political system. That shit's dangerous. And I think and I also do think that the court had no business ruling on a primary contest. I think that if this was about this general election, there's a case to be made from the plain language of the amendment. But I don't think they should be involved in the primary situation.
I mean, one issue that I have with the whole thing is just that it feels to me like all of these court cases that Donald Trump is involved in, they've all been sort of, holding him with kid gloves, sort of saying, we're not going to, he's, because of the election, because after the first, investigation began, he jumped into the race. I mean, now maybe he would have gotten in anyway, but to me, he's using the system as a defense and as a way to stay out of jail. So I think that, one could argue that the Colorado Supreme Court is just saying, you can't be a criminal or an insurrectionist, as they put it, and be on the ballot, or at least we have the option to take you off. And I think that if Trump hadn't been so successful with all of these cases to get everything pushed every time he wants a delay or anything, and his argument is always, well, but that would interfere with the election. You're interfering with the election. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, who's interfered with the election more than Donald Trump? Nobody. I mean, that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing by kind of, creating this whole drama. Now, do I think that this is the right way to go about it? I don't know. I mean, because I think what's probably going to happen is the Supreme Court will probably agree with Ted and rule against pulling him off the ballot, which will be interesting for them because, as far as a woman's body is concerned, the state has all the rights they want to do. But if it's about taking Donald Trump off the ballot, no way.
Yeah, I can't predict how this court's going to roll because I'm looking at original intent, for instance, and they love to do that, especially the more conservative members. The original intent was clearly to keep the former Confederates out of office, but it was also people who ran an insurrection. Ted and I disagree. I think it was an insurrection. I think it was they kind of stumbled, bumbled, and fumbled their way into it. But that's Trump. That's Trump Nation. They don't stumble, bumble, fumble their way into everything.
I'm not saying that it wasn't an insurrection. I'm just saying that it's not clear, and that you don't strip someone from the ballot based on something
clear,
that's
Ted.
not. Well, there's not widespread agreement.
Well, there is in my office.
There hasn't been, I think to Ted's point, there hasn't been a ruling yet. I mean, all these cases are outstanding, and they've, even though the Justice Department has put others in jail, they haven't convicted Trump yet. And so that's the dilemma is.
And they were all tried for things like trespassing, and they weren't tried for insurrection.
Right. Right. But I mean, look at the documents case. I mean, one of the easiest cases to prove that Trump broke the law. And look at, he's got a judge now that's in his corner. So she's going to delay that, and he's going to just keep delaying and delaying. And the other thing that bothers me is, none of the courts have really punished him for all of the, all the kind of the libelous things he's been doing, and the gag orders he's been, violating. And if it was any other defendant, he would have been in jail by now, or at the very least he would have been fined and or put on some sort of probation situation.
Although
lockdown at Mar-a-Lago.
It's true, Rob, but I mean, I agree with you that he's gotten special treatment. But on the other hand, it's also true that he probably got charged more because he's Donald Trump by people like Fani Willis in Georgia, and here in New York, the DA, Letitia James, trying to make a political name for themselves, right? I mean, I don't think all of these cases would have been brought up against someone else.
Oh, I disagree. I think the case in Manhattan, you're right. The case in Georgia, absolutely, they should have brought charges against this guy. He clearly tried to get them to lie and gin up, what was it, 10,000 votes?
Yeah.
And I think the evidence is overwhelming that case, I think, of all the cases, is probably the strongest.
Yeah.
He's on tape. He's on tape. He's recorded, trying to interfere in the election. And then there are other people in his circle that did the same thing at his behest. So,
but again, it needs to be adjudicated. I mean, is it like really, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but like, I assume in 1960, Richard Nixon was calling around looking for votes. I assume Al Gore and George W. Bush were doing the same thing in 2000. Is that role interfering with an election, or is that just trying to, try to get a recount to go to your way,
Now you sound like Speaker Johnson, who, he filed the case saying that they should overturn the election, but that's not really trying to overturn an election. That's just what people do. There
Ted Rall, Trump apologist. We've seen it here today, folks.
I mean, look, I think Donald Trump, I agree with you guys that he's a piece of shit. And, if we're, and by the way, a lot of the shit that we're dealing with right now in Gaza, we don't talk about Trump's role in all that, but he definitely, by moving the consulate to Jerusalem, he emboldened the Israelis to go absolutely fucking insane. But I mean, I guess the thing is, he's working the system to his advantage, no doubt. But like, how do we balance the desire to hold him accountable, which is fair and right? How do we hold that, against the right of the American people to cast a ballot for the candidate of their choice, even if he's a total asshole?
Well, that's the big question. And I don't know, I don't know the answer. I'm with you on that in terms of like, I'm totally, I don't think he's got the interest of the average voter in mind. I think he's all out for himself. He's a piece of shit, and he shouldn't be on the ballot. But he's currently leading by double digits. I mean, more than double digits.
He's beating Biden.
Yeah, and he's winning. Yeah, he's winning the general poll too. So I do kind of have. There's a nagging thing in the back of my mind that's saying, it's probably not right to pull him off the ballot, but I wish they would.
Satisfaction. You know what I would love to see, and maybe this is like peak Ted as wuss. But under the 14th Amendment, 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, if they both vote to do this, they can overrule the Colorado Supreme Court and say he goes back on the ballot. And wouldn't it be nice if like if the Democrats said, you know what, we want the American people to have that choice that they want to have, so we're going to go ahead and vote to keep him on the ballot, and then we're going to campaign against him vigorously.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Well, it might, because I think that the Democrats don't want it to come. They don't want to have a situation where Trump is not on the ballot, and therefore all of the MAGA population feels like there wasn't a fair election. I think there is a part of them that wants this election to be all above board and have Biden win fair and square, so that there's no argument later. Now, that said, that you're counting on an electorate that is sane, and these people are clearly insane, and so they have not, even because he lost fair and square in 2020, and they won't accept it. So what's to say they're going to accept it if it's fair and square in 2024? Nothing. I mean,
or what's to say that they won't still vote for Trump, which is like, if the election were held tomorrow, they would. I mean, the thing is, the problem with democracy is, of course, that people get to choose, and people often make the wrong decision.
Right. Well, I heard one commentator say that if the Supreme Court rules in favor of Colorado and says he can't be on the ballot, that means that ruling would overarch everything, and he wouldn't even be able to run for president. Like, in other words, even if people voted for him, he wouldn't legally be able to accept the nomination or the presidency if he wanted.
Yeah, that's true. Even write-in ballots would not count for him.
Right. In other words, even if they took him off the ballot and the write-ins, that ruling would supersede everything, and he would be out. So I don't think the Supreme Court wants that fight. I don't think they're going to do it. So they're probably either going to rule that Colorado can't do it, and then what basis?
I suspect they could come and do what was that other decision? Was that where they can't take him off a primary ballot? Mm-hmm. But like they said, come back to us during the general election, and then it gets to be very high drama. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And
in other words, they're just going to delay like Trump is doing.
That may be the right decision.
That's the legal way.
If they agree with the lower court's decisions that a primary is different than a general election, then that would probably be the right decision.
What about the Supreme Court immunity argument? Do you guys have any feeling of how they would rule that? Because that's the other one that Jack Smith is trying to get there. He's trying to get that immunity argument out of the way.
There's no way. They've already made indicated. It strikes me that this court, although it's conservative, still believes in the rule of law, and they are still lawyerly wonks. And they look at that and they say, "There's no way in God's green earth he has immunity after he leaves office. You just don't have it anymore."
Well, I don't think there's any immunity when they're in office. I mean, the Constitution is completely silent on the issue of presidential immunity, and it's the only reason that presidents, like, for example, Bill Clinton wasn't going to be prosecuted while he was in office.
Well, Richard Nixon.
It was just DOJ practice. It was just policy. It was never,
why don't they extend that to us? We're busy guys. Can we just say, you know what? We're a little busy right now. Can we delay this until,
Rob and Scott are on deadline. And and after this deadline, there's another deadline. And there's a deadline after that. I can't even. Yeah. No, I do think that, like, if Ketanji Brown Jackson is a self-professed originalist as well, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, I would think that through a strict reading of the Constitution, they will determine that neither then President nor former President Trump enjoys any immunity, or for that matter, President Biden. Like, nobody. They just don't. We're all equal under the law. I think that's what they're going to say.
Well, except do you remember when Attorney General Barr years ago wrote, I think it was a graduate thesis on how when Nixon said, if the president does it, it's legal. And he actually substantiated that and said, well, he's right. And then all of a sudden he works for Trump. He goes, I may have to rethink that one.
Yeah, but it took him 4 years to rethink it,
Yeah, I know. I just I really can't handicap this as it goes up to the Supreme Court. What I can do is that I believe Colorado was correct in doing it. I believe that this man committed insurrection and should not be allowed to run for public office again.
Wow.
But I want it done. It's justice, like democracy, is slow, it's arduous, it's frustrating, but I suspect that's where we're going to get, particularly as the Georgia case progresses, and we're going to get more and more evidence there. And as there's more discovery, we're going to find that indeed Trump, because we still don't know, we don't have his cell phone numbers, his personal cell phone activity. There's so much we don't know what this man was doing during that time period, but we all know what he was doing.
We all know.
Come on.
Yeah, no, it's true. We know. Yeah.
He had popcorn and he was watching the whole thing. And
will no one rid me of these meddlesome election results.
Right. So that's my take on it, that I suspect that this Supreme Court will look at it. There's a very good chance they'll strike it down for a primary, but say revisit us during a general election. And that's when I'm afraid things get, again, if we can take just one more minute, Ted, and talk about, let's assume for a moment, the Supreme Court says, yeah, Colorado, you're right. Betty bar the door. I mean, these motherfuckers have a lot of guns.
They sure fucking do. I mean, that's what I worry about here. The three of us can bandy about, the original intent of the people in the Andrew Johnson administration who drafted this during Reconstruction, right? But the point is, politics in America isn't about that granular shit. It's about bumper sticker politics. And Republicans are just going to say, Democrats knew they were going to fucking lose because Biden's polls sucked. So rather than fight us fair and square, they decided to cheat like weasels and go through the courts. That's what they're going to say. And it's going to be believed. It's a strong argument, even though it may not be right. It's a powerful argument.
We were driving. Real quick. Go ahead, Ted.
Just one point about that is that you mentioned they have guns. I mean, I think that one of the problems is if we give in to this threat of violence that Trump is promoting every time he speaks. You look at all the judges and all the courtrooms and how they've been threatened, and they keep going. They keep processing and hopefully prosecuting. And I think we have to do the same thing. I don't think we can make a decision on something based on the idea that they might get mad and they might.
Oh no! I wasn't. You're
essentially citing like the Colorado Supreme Court decision. They said our job is to make a decision without fear or favor. Just follow the law where we lead us, where it leads.
And I'm not saying
they're not wrong.
No, well, you're absolutely right in that instance. Yeah, you can't be afraid of these assholes. You gotta just keep doing it. My point is that these assholes will indeed rise up. We were driving around Chicago yesterday, and driving back to the city, some guy in a truck goes by. Actually, there's a woman driving a truck. The back of the truck says "Fuck Joe Biden." This huge sticker in the back of her window. It's like, well, that's classy. But it's just like that's the mentality that's going to rise up. I'm saying this as a warning, not as a way to say you need to take that into consideration when they make this decision. But if this decision comes down and the Supreme Court does say, yeah, you can knock them off the ballot, it's gonna be pretty brutal.
Well, and it's gonna start spreading to the other states too, So that'll be, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the states that matter, Pennsylvania. Wait, Rob, you're in Pennsylvania. How would this? I mean, is this something could happen in Pennsylvania? Could they say take them off the ballot?
Yeah. I mean, they could.
And
they could, except that I think our state house is. I mean, it would have to go through the Supreme Court. But it could happen. Sure.
In a state like Pennsylvania, it would matter. I mean, it's funny. If it's just stopped in Colorado. From an electoral college standpoint, it wouldn't make any difference. Biden's currently, even in his current situation, ahead by 6 in Colorado. So he will win Colorado.
So Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, those 3 states, if they do any one of those 3 do that, then Trump can't win. He can't win without those 3.
True.
And if one of those states comes out and says, yeah, we're going to do the same thing, then you're going to, then you're facing, I mean, you're going to have people with bumper stickers that just say insurrectionist, proudly, and it's going to, and so I'm just saying, warning, and we have to put up with this. Maybe this is just the price we pay for democracy every 150 years we have to go through this bullshit.
Well, is it democracy? I mean, come on, even when you consider the fucked up, Sam Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes 1876 election, there has never been an election where there was one candidate on the ballot for president of the United States. I mean,
but don't you?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
And theoretically, you could get them both kicked off if you could get something on Biden. You could have a ballot with no candidate for president.
Just write in, just write in Ted Rall for president.
Clovis.
But
isn't
it the case that if they figure it out early enough, I mean, then you got DeSantis or Nikki Haley right there to jump in. I mean, the idea is there wouldn't be just one person on the ballot.
Well, could the Republican Party could decide to protest this decision by not putting up a candidate? And I suspect
they're not going to do that.
Oh, well,
they're not going to do that.
But here's what's going to happen is that, don't forget, now you've thrown it back to states.
Who wants to be the Marshal Pétain of the GOP, though?
This gets thrown back to the state parties. The party of Colorado will have to decide whether or not, if this stands, whether or not to nominate somebody else. Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Clovis, Ted's cat. That's what this comes down to. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. These parties are, almost all of them are owned lock, stock, and barrel by MAGA Nation.
Yes.
So if Trump says, I'm the candidate, you can't do anything else, don't nominate anybody else, no one's as good, no one's as perfect, and they won't.
Don't let anyone else do it.
Right. And if, let's say, for instance, Pennsylvania knocks Trump off the ballot, and the Pennsylvania Republican Party nominates Nikki Haley. She's a traitor. She's a stab in the back. Don't vote for her. I mean, there's no way, firstly, she could win. But secondly, and
if she were wise, she would not accept it because of those concerns of being remembered for this 4 years from now.
Yeah, yes, and it is interesting that all the Republican candidates have said, "Don't do this." Don't take Trump off the ballot, even though it would help them actually in those states. But
no, because they don't want to be viewed as traitors.
Right. And it could go south, like Scott just said. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, and the party would turn on him. And like I said, most Republican parties, to my knowledge, across the nation, there's no Bush wing or Dole wing anymore. It's all MAGA Nation. And I mean, it's particularly in the parties. And so if he gets kicked off, oh my gosh, think about this. I come back to my original point, which is when else in our history would we have this conversation except when Donald Trump is still fucking alive? I just want him to be humping some porn star and have a heart attack. That's the way he'd want to go out.
True.
Donald Jr. could say that he came in the way he came in.
I want him to fall down the golden escalator and just take a face plant.
Really, I was hoping he was going to choke on one of those big Mexican bowls from the restaurant in Trump Tower.
Right.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's when he had. It's my favorite meme of all time. It was Donald Trump out there when he was like doing that stupid salute when he came back from the hospital after being treated for COVID. It says, "COVID, you had one job." We're probably not going to be able to post this now because we're talking about dead Donald Trump. Oh well.
All right.
No, okay.
I think we should.
Ted?
Yeah, we should move on here.
Okay.
All right. So let's take a little break and we'll come right back. I'll hit the stop button here.
DMZ America.